You know, we can talk about stats all day, but let's forget the wrong numbers for a second. We're about to dive into the kind of NFL records that feel less like math and more like mythology. These are the achievements that are so far out there, they pretty much break the rules of the game. So let's get into it and figure out why some of these might just stand forever.
See, every record, it's a challenge, right? It's a line drawn in the sand. It's basically a statement saying, okay, this is it. This is the absolute peak of what a human being can do in this sport. Nobody can go further.
But the athletes we're about to talk about, oh, they didn't just cross that line. They completely erased it. They weren't just chasing history. They were forcing the league to rewrite the whole book. We're talking about a level of dominance that actually changes the game itself.
All right, so our first category of dominance isn't about some single brilliant flash in the pan. Nope, this is all about relentless endurance. These are the records that were built not just on talent, but on an almost superhuman ability to just survive. And when you talk about survival in the NFL, one name just pops into your head immediately, right? Tom Brady. He wasn't the fastest guy, he didn't have the strongest arm, but he has something way more dangerous. He was just inevitable.
Brady's whole game was this slow, methodical takeover of the record books. He didn't shatter records in one monster season, he just kept playing and kept winning. And over 2 decades, the numbers just piled up so high that they cast this massive shadow over the entire league.
Seriously, think about it. The guy outlasted entire generations of players. He played through multiple rule changes, saw defensive schemes completely evolve, and while other stars burned incredibly bright and then faded out, Brady just stayed. His records are a monument to survival, and that's exactly what makes them so ridiculously hard to beat.
Okay, now let's look at this number for a second. 18,355. That is the mountain of rushing yards that Emmitt Smith piled up. It is a staggering figure, and there's a really fascinating reason why it might never ever be topped.
So this record might be safe forever, but it's not for the reason you might think. It's not because it's physically impossible. It's because of a fundamental shift in how the NFL operates. The league simply does not produce running backs like Emmitt Smith anymore.
This right here, this says it all. Smith was a pure workhorse. He took hit after punishing hit season after season. But modern backs, they're treated like high-performance cars, rotated, protected, and often replaced before the mileage gets too high. And this isn't just about player safety. It completely changes how teams are built. Front offices just don't invest a top draft pick and a huge long-term contract in one guy to carry the mail for a decade. The whole offensive strategy has evolved, and in the process, it's built a fortress around Emmitt's throne.
So, we've seen how longevity can build a record that's basically unbreakable. But what about the total opposite? What about a single, perfect season of just utter dominance? Let's switch gears from the marathon to the sprint and look at records built on one season of pure, unfiltered power.
55. Back in 2013, that's how many touchdown passes Peyton Manning threw. It was a season where defenses knew exactly what was coming, and they were completely and totally powerless to do anything about it.
And the key thing to understand here is that Manning wasn't just reacting to the game, he was dictating it. He was like a supercomputer at the line of scrimmage, turning every single snap into a chess match he had already won moves ago.
This was his process, a 4-step masterpiece. He'd diagnose the defense, find its one fatal flaw, command his players into the perfect spot, and then, boom, execute with surgical precision. It was all about total command, and that's why this record still stands, even in a league that's completely obsessed with passing.
But hey, single-season dominance isn't just for quarterbacks. Take a look at this number, 31. In 2006, LaDainian Tomlinson scored 31 total touchdowns. The man didn't just visit the end zone, he basically owned property there.
It was incredible. Defenses would stack 8 guys in the box against him, and he'd score. They'd spread out to cover the pass, and he'd still score. He was a complete one-man scoring machine. And just like with Emmitt Smith, this record is protected by the league's philosophy. Modern offenses spread the love around. They just don't let one guy carry that kind of scoring load anymore.
And this kind of single-season magic wasn't just on offense. On the other side of the ball, you had Michael Strahan getting 22.5 sacks, a one-man wrecking crew that just terrorized quarterbacks. And then there was Calvin Johnson, who racked up almost 2,000 receiving yards through sheer unstoppable physical force.
That's the thing, right? Defensive coordinators didn't even scheme to stop Megatron. They just schemed to contain the damage. He wasn't getting open with clever routes. He was just physically dominating anyone who dared to line up across from him, whether it was one defender, two, or even three.
But what if a player could combine both? What if someone had the longevity of a marathon runner and the peak performance of a sprinter? Well, that's our final category. And really, it's a category of one. It's reserved for one man, Jerry Rice.
Just look at these numbers. They're not just impressive anymore, they are flat out absurd. Jerry Rice doesn't have rivals in the record book, he just has distance. I mean, the gap between him and whoever is in second place, that gap by itself is a Hall of Fame career.
But here's what makes Rice's numbers almost impossible to comprehend: the era he played in. He was putting up these video game stats at a time when defensive backs could basically assault receivers downfield. He did not have the benefit of all the pass-friendly rules that protect modern players, which makes what he did even more mind-blowing.
So what was his secret? Yeah, he was talented, but it was more than that. It was an obsession, an absolutely unparalleled work ethic that made him the most prepared, the best conditioned, and the most disciplined player on the field every single year. He didn't just raise the bar, he put it somewhere up in the stratosphere where no one else could even see it.
So, after looking at all these Mount Everest-type records, it really begs the question, right? What does it even take to break them? Who out there is even capable of challenging these gridiron gods?
Because at the end of the day, these records weren't just broken, they were completely obliterated. And they weren't shattered by players who were just a little bit better than the last guy. They were shattered by outliers, by athletes who, by all logic, really shouldn't exist. A quarterback who could literally defy time, a receiver fueled by pure obsession, a mind that could see the future before the ball was even snapped.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. After we've gone through the anatomy of domination, from the marathon of longevity to the sprint of peak power, all the way to the sheer obsession of a guy like Jerry Rice, which of these records do you think is truly 100% unbreakable?